British politics are in utter chaos as reform tears apart their comfortable little bubble. The main parties are not just worried, they are in a state of complete panic. And nowhere is this pitiful despair more evident than in the embarrassing scene of Harriet Harman losing her cool on live television. She is screaming and shouting, calling reform a threat to democracy, but all she is really doing is exposing the absolute terror that is gripping her and the entire Labour Party. You can see it in their eyes, hear it in their trembling voices. They know that their days of unchecked power are numbered. This is not just fear. This is not just fear. This is total collapse. Have a watch of this.
Harriet, it's not just the Tories who have to be worried. Mr Farage is after Labour seats as well. And I think the number now was they came second in 89 seats to Labour. How worried should the party be about the threat, or the challenge, I should say, from Farage?
Well, I think people should be very concerned about reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers to real problems, which are not a solution and will just increase people's distrust and disillusionment. But I think the Shadow Minister who you had on was really in denial about the situation. If you look at the council by-election results, and I'm afraid I look at them every Friday morning very anxiously after the Thursday council by-elections, what they show, I know, is that they show a real fall in Labour's support. If you look at the percentage change, it's not just about who's won, it's who's voting and what the percentage change is. And reform from a standing start is like gaining 40%, whereas the Labour's down, but the Tories are massively down as well. And I think that the main threat to reform currently from reform is to the Tory party. And what I didn't see is any acknowledgement, and we haven't seen this either from Kemi Badenoch, that reform is a problem. They're saying it's not a problem until they say, look, we're really up against it. They won't start dealing with it.
Harriet Harman's remarks expose not just Labour's anxiety, but also its sheer incompetence in confronting the very real and growing threat from Reform UK. Instead of acknowledging the seismic shifts happening in the political landscape, Labour retreats into its tired, delusional narrative of smearing opponents as a threat to democracy. This is not the voice of a confident party ready to lead the country. It is the panicked squeal of a political establishment that sees its foundations cracking beneath it. Harman's attempt to dismiss Reform UK as offering easy answers is particularly laughable. Reform's success comes not because they peddle simplicity, but because they are connecting with a frustrated electorate abandoned by both Labour and the Conservatives. People are not stupid. They recognize that reform speaks to their concerns about immigration, the economy, and national identity, issues that Labour sneers at or ignores entirely. While Labour clings to empty rhetoric, Reform has managed to claim second place in 89 Labour seats, a shocking indictment of Labour's failure to engage with its own traditional base. The council by-election results Harriet Harman cites only deepen the humiliation. Labour's complacency is eroding its support, and yet Harman would rather bury her head in the sand than confront the uncomfortable truth. Reform UK is not just siphoning votes from the Conservatives. It is tapping into Labour's neglected working-class heartlands. The arrogance of Labour's leadership, believing they are entitled to these voters, has left them dangerously exposed to a political reckoning. If Labour refuses to recognise reform as a threat, they are sealing their own fate. The strategy of dismissing reform or slandering their supporters as gullible or disillusioned will backfire spectacularly. Reform UK represents a challenge born out of Labour's failings, their failure to offer real solutions to voters, their failure to inspire trust, and their failure to bridge the divide between their metropolitan leadership and the working-class communities they claim to represent. By ignoring this growing insurgency, Labour risks repeating the catastrophic losses it suffered in 2019, only this time with reform playing the role of kingmaker in British politics. Now let's move on to the next news.
What I said during the leadership contest, that a cap on its own is not enough, that numbers matter, so yes, a cap, but culture matters more. Who is coming into the country? How are we integrating them? How are we making sure that the people who come to this country care about it? This is not a hostel, it's not a dormitory, this is our home, and then making sure that the leadership follows through. So a cap is something that we can do. But what I don't do is just make random promises without explaining where it's all going to come from. So I said that a cap will be needed, but what was that cap going to be? Let's work out what we can sustain. We're going to need to have a very systemic review. How many homes should we be building? What makes sense? What is happening to our population? Where do we need skills? And make sure that migration is controlled. So we can do a lot on immigration if we're given the chance, but the first thing we need to do is earn trust. And that is why, no matter how tough it is, I will make sure that I hold the Prime Minister to account on immigration at PMQs. We are the opposition, and we've got a job to do, and I'm going to make sure that we do that job.
Kemi Badenoch's desperate attempt to appear authoritative while lecturing Labour on immigration is as laughable as it is hypocritical. Here we have a member of a Conservative government that has presided over years of utter failure, skyrocketing immigration numbers, broken promises, and chaotic policies, and yet she still dares to wag her finger at Labour as though her own party's incompetence hasn't led to this crisis in the first place. Her claims of acknowledging mistakes are meaningless without results. The British public is tired of empty words and theatrical posturing, and Badenoch's comprehensive plan is yet another vague last-ditch attempt to salvage a Conservative party that is rotting from the inside out. Labour, of course, is no better. While Badenoch's Conservatives have opened the floodgates, Labour under Keir Starmer offers nothing but cowardly dithering and spineless avoidance of real solutions. Starmer's record of opposing deportations and supporting free movement speaks volumes about how little regard he has for the concerns of ordinary voters. Labour is so terrified of offending its activist base and metropolitan elites that it refuses to address immigration as the urgent issue it is, leaving its traditional working-class supporters feeling abandoned and betrayed. What makes Badenoch's attack even more pathetic is that it comes from a place of desperation. The Conservatives are losing ground to Reform UK, a party that has exposed their abject failure on immigration for all to see. For over a decade, the Tories have promised tough action while delivering record numbers of arrivals, all while lecturing the electorate to be patient. Now, when their failure has become undeniable, Badenoch and her colleagues are scrambling to pin the blame on Labour as though voters are too stupid to see through the charade. The truth is both parties are a disgrace. Labour refuses to engage with immigration honestly, while the Conservatives make excuses for their own impotence. Kemi Badenoch can grandstand on GB News all she likes, but no amount of bluster will erase the reality that her party has let immigration spiral out of control on their watch. And Labour, in its usual fashion, offers nothing but empty platitudes, proving once again that it is as useless in opposition as the Conservatives are in government. Between these two failing parties, Britain has been left with skyrocketing immigration, rising public anger, and no real leadership. If Badenoch thinks the public will keep falling for these hollow promises, she is just as deluded as Labour's Keir Starmer. Thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts or opinions, feel free to share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more updates, and join us on Telegram for exclusive content and discussions. Your support means a lot,